Hi, I'm Nigel Saunders. Today we're going to be creating a beautiful African Kopje landscape. I've got an empty pot and I'm going to be combining a lot of my existing materials to create this African landscape. I was looking at my Serissa tree the other day and I was thinking the pot doesn't look very large anymore. I'll be using 3 of the Serissa trees I have as one element of the landscape. In a previous video, I did plant a Kopje style landscape with my acacia trees, so I'm going to use those rocks and that type of hill with my Serissa trees. And the acacia trees, I'll prune those up and just let them grow until they get mature enough to have their own kind of landscape. Also in a previous video, I planted some sedum as a ground cover for my spruce tree, and I like the look of them. They look like miniature bushes or trees, so I think that's an element that I can also use in this new landscape. The pot I'll be using is identical to the one I have here that my Portulacaria afroforest is planted in. It's a large tray-style mica pot. The first step will be to clean my pot, put drainage screens in, and fill it with a layer of soil. I use regular window screening to cover my holes up and put the soil on top. With my screens in place, I'm going to start adding my base layer of soil. The trees I'll be planting in this pot have a fairly shallow root system, so I can fill my pot up quite high, almost this far below the lip. Arranging all the elements in the pot will be the artistic and the challenging part of this planting. I'll be using these 3 trees in the planting, so I can arrange them in the pot and try and find a pleasing arrangement. I want the large tree in the foreground and my Kopje in the background, my hill. And these trees will be spaced out to give that African savanna feel. I've arranged the trees roughly to my liking. I've got my largest tree over to the right hand side and I'll push it towards the front of the pot. My middle-sized tree will be over to the left and it'll be in the middle of the pot. And then towards the back I have my smallest tree. In between the trees I'll have my Kopje, my small hill, and I'm going to try and design it so it looks like it's in the distance or in the background. The landscape will be a level landscape, except for the area around the Kopje, which will be raised up slightly. These trees were all repotted over the winter, so I'm going to try and get them out of the pots and try not to disturb the roots as much as I can and get them into the new container. I'm going to start with my largest tree. So I don't know how far the roots have grown in this pot, probably not very far. I don't see any roots in this section of the soil. They're just starting here, yeah. So they're just reaching the edge of the pot. So I'm going to try and get this out in one piece if I can. I'm thinking I need like a spatula underneath it or something to lift it out with. So maybe I'll try and find something I can slip underneath the soil and lift the whole thing out. I've cut out a piece of cardboard from a cereal box and I'm going to try and slide that underneath the soil so I can lift the tree out of the pot and into the new pot without disturbing the root base too much. So here I go. I'm going to see if this works. I'm going to kind of slide it under the best I can. I'm sure this will disturb the roots somewhat, but if I lift the tree up a bit, it'll help. I don't know. Doesn't seem to be working really well, but it's sort of working. There we go. Now we can lift the tree out like that. Take this pot away. And we can plant our new tree. I want it up front and to the right hand side. So somewhere right about here. That's done the job. Most of the roots didn't get disturbed around the base of the tree. Just these fine roots that are just starting to grow towards the perimeter of the pot. Now I've got to decide, is that close enough to the front? I think it is. I think it's a comfortable distance. It's in front of the center line of the pot. I could maybe just move it up just a little bit more I'll just clear away some of the soil here. Move it just a little bit closer, like that. And I think that'll be quite nice. The height looks good for a flat landscape. I'm sure I'll be adjusting the trees slightly when I get them all in the pot and the rocks in too. I'm going to add my copy behind the tree here as my next element to see how they look together, and that'll determine where I arrange my other two trees. Before I start adding rocks to the planting, I'm going to build up my hill with soil first and then start adding the rocks to it. So everything else will be level except for my hill back here. My hill won't be exactly on the center of the pot, it'll be offset slightly. So somewhere right about here. And it'll be towards the back. I think that's piled up enough that I can start placing rocks around now. I like the arrangement of the rocks in my previous copy, so I'm going to just duplicate that. I'll just move it stone by stone and use the same placing. I'm just transferring my rocks now. Something like that. I'll have a look at it and see if I have to do any rearranging. I'm having a look at the planting now from the front, checking out the composition, and I'm thinking the copy needs to be a little wider. This is a longer, wider pot, and I could stretch it out a bit. So I've got a couple more rocks that I can add. Maybe one here, and another one there. I think that'll fill it out a little better. I'm going to position my second tree now. I want the trees in the foreground so the copy looks like it's in the background, so it looks larger than it actually is. So here I go. Let's get it out of the pot and try it in various positions. So here goes tree number 2. Again, all these trees were repotted this winter, so they don't have a whole lot of roots in the pot yet. But they will come out in one piece. I wanted it at least in the middle or slightly forward. We'll see how it looks there. Before I position my second tree, I'm going to get my third tree out, and I can play around with the positioning of them to try and get a nice pleasing arrangement. There's all the elements positioned now, kind of how I originally envisioned it. So I'm looking at it now critically, and I'm thinking it's looking almost too balanced. It needs some unbalance to it. It's very symmetrical, you know, the copies in the middle, and around it are the trees, and they're all kind of equal weight to the right and the left. So I'm not liking that. I think I've got to create a little bit of unbalance to it. So I think for starters, I can move the main tree over to the right hand side a little more. So I moved the tree over. I think it looks a little better. It looks a little more balanced on the right hand side. I'm thinking the left hand side, I'm going to try moving my main tree back a little towards the back of the planting and see how that looks. I've moved the middle-sized tree back further, but I don't like it. It doesn't make the copy look in the background. It kind of looks in the same plane as it. So I'm going to move it forward again. I've moved the two trees over on the left-hand side, moved them around a bit, and I think that's probably a fairly good position for them. I think I will have to move my copy, or my rock pile, over to the right hand side just a little. It looks a little too symmetrically right in the middle of the pot. So I think that might be the problem. I've got to move them towards the right. So I'll do that. I've moved the copy over a little bit, and I like that better. It's a little more dynamic. It gives me a little more space on the left hand side. So I think I'm going to move that smallest tree back a little bit more and maybe a little closer to the copy. I've moved those two trees around a bit, and I'm liking this. I think it's working quite well now. I think I'm going to fill it in with soil, and we can always make little adjustments later on if I find something that's bugging me, but I think it's not too bad. The three trees kind of give a savanna feel. They're not grouped too close together. It's got a bit of perspective. When I trim the back tree down shorter, try and get it to look more miniature and further away, I think it'll add to the feeling of perspective. I'm filling the soil in now, so the ground will be nice and level. I'm going to level my soil now, making sure my stones are above the surface of the soil. I don't want to bury them totally. Leveling the soil certainly changes the look of the landscape. And I'm looking at the Kopje, and it's looking maybe a little low. I might have to build my hill up just a little bit higher. Before I do that, I'm going to give the planting a thorough watering. So here I go with the water. We'll miss the top of the trees also. And there we go. Hi everyone, welcome back. It's day 2 of planting our African Kopje landscape. I was looking at the landscape last night and I'm still not happy with it. So I put the elements in the computer and I was moving them around a bit, and I think I've come up with a better solution. So I'll show you that. I brought a picture of my planting into a software called GIMP. It's a free online photo editing software. And I've separated all the elements into different layers. So I've got my main tree, I can move that around. I've got my 2 little trees I can move around. I can move my Kopje around. So I'm trying to find a better arrangement, something I'm pleased with. One thing I did is I flipped the 2 little trees around, so the taller tree's in the middle, and then my background tree will be towards the outer edge. So I didn't like the tree over so far in the pot. It made a kind of a square edge on the right hand side, so I'm moving it over more to about here, so just off center towards the front. And I moved my Kopje over as far as I can to the right. And then my 2 little trees, I kind of tuck them in. So it still kind of creates a triangular shape to the overall planting layout. So I like this layout better than the one I presently have. So I'll go out now to the greenhouse and change it around. Before we go back in the greenhouse, I'll show you the moss I picked last night. I just picked it off the sidewalk and I soaked it today with some water and fertilizer and kept it in the sun to green it up a bit. It was pretty dry and going a bit brown on the sidewalk. I'm back in the greenhouse, so I'm going to start by moving my Kopje over towards the edge of the pot. I wanted to raise the height of the rocks, so as I'm moving them over, I'm going to put them on a bit of a hill to raise them up higher. I'm also going to remove some of the rocks towards the rear so I can push the rocks further back in the planting. The rocks are a little higher now. I want to make this quite green with moss as opposed to the rest of the planting. So this is like a green island. The rocks are moved over now. So next I'm going to move the main tree here towards the middle more, so the edge doesn't go straight up from the pot to the edge of the tree, so it comes in a bit. So the tree will be moved just off center. I've got the tree slid over now, and I like that much better. It seems to sit in the pot nicer. So next I want to move my medium-sized tree over towards the larger tree. I've moved the 2 smaller trees together. I moved the medium-sized one closer to the main tree, and I moved the small one further to the back and off to the left a bit. So I'm happy with that. I think it looks a nice arrangement now. I think it looks better than it did yesterday. So the next thing I want to do is start putting moss on top of my rock pile to make my Kopje kind of like a nice green island. I'm going to carefully apply the moss to my Kopje and build up a green island. So I'm just going to fit little pieces in place around the rocks. So I'm just breaking it up into small pieces that will fit in the cracks So I don't cover up the rocks, but I have green around them. This moss will grow well in the greenhouse. And I'll leave the trees in there till it recovers. Here's the progress on the Kopje. I've got a lot of green on it now. It's looking like a green island with the rocks, something that lions would live in. I've still got to, do a lot of pushing the moss down to get it settled in. I'll water it heavily, get it all squished in place so it has good contact with the soil, so it doesn't dry out. I do want to put the indication of a roadway going through the front of the planting, so I'll put that in sand and sort of a red soil, and it'll be green all around it. I'm adding some washed playground sand underneath the main tree. So it doesn't look too lush in the shade of the tree. There we go. When I water that, it'll all settle in nicely around the base of the tree. I'm roughing in my roadway now, just putting some sand down to kind of get an idea of where I want it to go. Kind of winding through the trees here. Yeah, sort of twisting through, just enough to get a Land Rover on there. I've got my roadway roughed in sand, and I put sand around various places to sort of fill in the cracks of the moss. So now I'm going to give it a watering to kind of level all this sand so it all blends in with the moss. So here I go. I might have to do this several times to get the look I want. My next operation will be to prune up the main tree. The canopy's kind of getting a little too tall. That's a little lopsided looking, so I'm going to try and straighten that out a bit and get it looking better. I'll be coming in with the long shears and just profile pruning the top of the tree. I've got the main tree pruned up now, and I added a little Land Rover down there for scale. The next element I'm going to be adding to the planting is my small sedum. I've collected some sedum from the front garden, and I'll be planting this to create the look of little bushes. So I'm going to get out a clump of sedum here. Sedum is really easy to propagate. You just have to pick off a little bit of it, if you see it somewhere, and plant it, and it'll spread and grow roots. And I'll just put a bit of sand on top to kind of get that settled in. You can use any kind of plant as a ground cover to create little miniature bushes. You just have to make sure everything's in scale. You don't want a plant that has great big leaves and looks out of place. It's got to fit in with the scale of the planting. This sedum, once it gets established, I can prune it down in height and shape it into little miniature bushes. So right now it's just getting established, so I'll leave it tall like this. I've got my sedum planted now. I put some underneath the tree here, a little clump here, one here, and a small clump over here. So we'll see what they look like as they grow in, and I can prune them down in height and play around with them. I think it'll be kind of interesting. Next up, I'm going to prune these two back trees, removing some of these lower branches and get the upright canopy started on them. Okay, so here I go. Just moving some of these lower branches. So now you can see the difference in height of the main tree, the second tree, and the third tree gets smaller, and it gives us a sense of perspective. It makes everything, the back of the planting look to be in the distance, and everything at the front of the planting looks closer. And I can do that with my ground cover too. I can keep the moss pruned in the front, I can keep it higher and coarser looking, and towards the back of the planting I'll keep my moss pruned fine and low, and it'll give the sense of perspective. I'm going to work on the roadway now. I'm going to put some ruts in it, and I'm going to try and color it with some, I'm going to grind up some clay to give it that red African soil look. I've got a file, and I've got a chunk of red clay. These are the red clay stones you use for landscaping. So I'm going to see if it files up. It does a bit. Not real well. I'll try pottery instead. I'll try this terracotta pot and see if that's any easier to file. Yeah, that's quite a bit easier actually. I'm going to give the pathway a water now and see how it all blends in when I water it. Get the dust off the trees here. Now that looks like it's giving it a nice subtle reddish color. I could probably even put a little more on. The Land Rover's left, and there's a zebra sitting under the shade of the main tree now. Here's a shot of the Kopje landscape out in the morning sun. It was really enjoyable making my Kopje landscape, and now it's time for today's update. Today's update is my aloe vera bonsai. This tree is almost a year old now, and it's looking really good. I can't complain about how it's grown. The tree's getting a little top heavy, so I'm going to remove some of these lower leaves. I'm just going to cut them off here, like that. A big one here. And a nice big one here. And I'm going to take these two off. So this one and one up top here. And I'll leave these as my growing tip. So my plan is to grow this tree fairly tall, then cut the top and get branching happening up top. These branches down below, I'm just leaving them to help thicken up the trunk. I've got a weed in here that I want to pull out. Get the roots and everything. Yeah, so I'm getting a lot of little pups, they call them, little branches growing off. There's one forming here, one up here. The trunk of the aloe is starting to get some nice bark on it, and I think that'll just keep improving as the tree gets older. So now it's time for today's viewers' picks. Today's picks are from Thea in Norway. She has an olive tree and a citrus tree. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I'm Nigel Saunders, and we'll see you next time.